Hello and welcome to the Enterprise Tech Talk podcast. I am your host, Saumitra Kalikar. In the last episode, we unpacked the concept of digital sovereignty, what it really means in the practical terms, and the steps Australian enterprises must take to strengthen their digital infrastructure. Now, building on that theme, in this episode, we focus specifically on AI sovereignty. Again, what it really means in practical terms, some sector-specific considerations, and what are the expectations from boards, CIOs, and policy leaders. So let's dive in. Let me begin with a simple premise. Artificial intelligence is not just another technology wave. It is a structural shift, one that is redefining economic competitiveness, regulatory authority, and national resilience. So for Australia, the question is no longer whether we adopt AI or not. The real question is under whose control would the intelligence operate? And to be clear upfront, sovereign AI is not about technological nationalism. It is about strategic assurance. It is about ensuring that the AI systems underpinning our healthcare, our financial markets, our defense capabilities, public services, and critical infrastructure, they all operate under Australian jurisdiction, under Australian legal authority, and Australian governance standards. So, as AI becomes embedded into the operating fabric of our nation, control over models, compute, and data is no longer just an IT concern. It becomes a matter of national interest, and that is the foundation of today's discussion. So, building on that foundation, let's clarify what we actually mean by sovereign AI. To put it simply, sovereign AI is the capability of a nation to develop, deploy, host, and govern AI systems in alignment with its legal frameworks, its strategic priorities, and societal values. And importantly, it goes well beyond the data residency. Look, residency focuses on where data is stored, but sovereign AI concerns the entire AI stack. For example, it spans compute infrastructure, energy capacity, semiconductor supply chain exposure, model lifecycle control, workforce capability, regulatory oversight, and operational assurance. So, in other words, sovereignty is not just a data storage question, it's a system question. At its core, sovereign AI rests on four foundational pillars. The first is sovereignty. It assures sensitive data is stored and processed within Australian jurisdictions with clear visibility into lawful access and any extraterritorial exposure. The second is infrastructure sovereignty, which ensures access to reliable domestic compute and data center capacity, which is capable of sustaining advanced AI workloads. The third is model sovereignty. It ensures ability to fine-tune, audit, or constrain AI models so that they reflect Australian legal requirements, language nuance, and ethical expectations. And the fourth one is normative sovereignty, which ensures regulatory and ethical guardrails grounded in democratic governance, human rights, and transparency, rather than just relying on foreign platforms and their policies. It is also important to recognize that sovereignty exists on a spectrum. Most advanced economies are not pursuing technological autarky. They are pursuing strategic control across territorial, operational, technological, and legal dimensions. So let's remember the objective of sovereign AI is not isolation. The objective is assured control where it matters most. So, having defined what sovereign AI means, the next question is why does it matter now? The answer lies in a convergence of external geopolitical pressures and internal economic realities. AI is increasingly recognized as a general purpose technology, which is comparable to electricity or the internet. And once the technology reaches to that status, it stops being optional infrastructure. It becomes a foundational infrastructure. And for Australia, sovereignty is in AI is not just ideological. It is strategic and is driven by both external and internal factors. Speaking of external factors, we all know that the global technology landscape is becoming more fragmented. We are seeing rising geopolitical tension, export controls, technological protectionism, and sudden policy shifts. In this context, dependence becomes exposure. One key issue to understand is the concentration risk. A small number of global hyperscalers dominate advanced AI compute and platform services. At the same time, the semiconductor supply chain remains highly concentrated with advanced AI chips largely designed in United States and fabricated primarily in Taiwan and South Korea. That creates three strategic risks. First is supply chain resilience. Without sufficient domestic compute capability, Australia remains exposed to export restrictions, regional instability, or supply disruptions that could constrain access to critical AI infrastructure. The second, regulatory independence. If global AI standards are primarily shaped elsewhere, Australian priorities, including transparency, fairness, indigenous rights, they all risk being subordinate to foreign regulatory models or platform policies. Sovereignty ensures Australian law remains the governing authority. Third, security and national interests. Because AI systems developed offshore may introduce bias, opaque decision making logic, or security vulnerabilities. In sensitive domains, even small governance gaps can have outsized consequences. But this is not just about external risks. Internally, Australia has experienced subdued productivity growth over the past decade. AI is widely viewed as a lever for lifting both public sector efficiency and private sector competitiveness. Yet, there is second internal dynamic, which is trust. Public sentiment towards AI remains cautious within Australia. Australians consistently express concern about bias, misinformation, job displacements, and misuse of personal data. Sovereign AI, therefore, is not just about resilience, it is about earning the public license to deploy AI at scale. So, before defining Australia's path forward, it is also important to step back and examine how other nations are approaching this challenge. There is no single model of sovereignty AI. Instead, the global landscape reveals several distinct playbooks, each shaped by economic structures, political philosophy, and technological maturity. So let's examine a few and what are the potential lessons for Australia. The European Union, for example, they have framed sovereignty primarily through the lens of digital rights. Initiatives such as EU AI Act, it aims to ensure that European data and AI systems operate within strong regulatory guardrails and are protected from foreign interference. The European model prioritizes protection and trust, sometimes at the cost of complexity. So, here is that the comprehensive regulations can strengthen assurance, but over engineering compliance can slow innovation as well. Australia's approach in this case has leaned towards a middle ground, that is, leveraging existing technological neutral laws while issuing targeted AI guidance rather than creating an entirely new regulatory regime. The United Kingdom has focused heavily on compute capability and AI safety leadership. It has invested in domestic high performance compute infrastructure and established an AI Safety Institute to position itself as a global center for AI risk governance. At the same time, The UK has welcomed private capital, including global firms, to build domestic data center capability under national oversight. So, lesson here is that sovereignty requires capital, energy, and infrastructure. It does not require building everything alone. Strategic partnerships can coexist with national control, provided governance remains domestic. If you look at Singapore, Singapore's National AI Strategy 2.0 focuses on orchestrated ecosystem development. It established a national AI office and an industry led advisory structure to align research, industry, and government efforts. It also prioritized specific sectors such as transport, manufacturing, and healthcare, where AI could generate measurable impact. So again, the lesson here is that sovereignty is strengthened by focus. Sector prioritization accelerates capability building and avoids diffuse investment. And if we look at some of the emerging markets such as India and Middle East, these emerging economies often face a difficult balance. Strict localization can deter investment for these economies, and extensive openness, on the other hand, can weaken strategic control. So, lesson here is that the true full stack sovereignty from semiconductor fabrication to application layer is economically unrealistic for most of the nations. The sustainable path is pragmatic sovereignty, which is strategic autonomy in critical layers combined with selective openness and interoperability. And this brings us to the next central question. Given these global models, what does an Australian version of sovereign AI looks like or should look like? So, having examined global approaches, let's now turn to Australia's position. Look, Australia's vision for AI sovereignty is articulated through the National AI Plan. Importantly, this vision is not about technology isolation. It is about strategic capacity, that is, the ability to shape, control, and govern the AI systems that influence our economy and public services while remaining an active participant in the global digital ecosystem. So, broadly, Australia's approach rests on three integrated pillars. First, the, f- um, the human centered AI. So, at its core, Australia's AI strategy emphasizes values such as fairness, diversity, transparency, and respect for human rights. The objective is to embed these values across the entire AI lifecycle, from development of new models and procurement to deployment and oversight. Sovereignty in this context is not just technical, it is ethical. The second pillar is um, public utility. Uh, Now, this recognizes AI as a capability that should address national priorities. So, from healthcare system optimization to environment monitoring and public service modernization, AI is positioned as a critical infrastructure, not just for innovation. Now, this framing elevates AI from an enterprise productivity tool to a nation building asset. The third pillar is strategic sovereignty. This includes building domestic infrastructure, strengthening data governance frameworks, and developing the workforce skills required to sustain AI development at scale. Strategic sovereignty means ensuring that the AI systems underpinning critical economic and government functions ultimately serve Australian policies and priorities. Australian National Plan also defines three overarching objectives. First is capture opportunities by investing in compute capacity, data center infrastructure, and local AI capability to strengthen Australia's regional competitiveness. Second is spread the benefits by supporting SME adoption, uplift workforce skills, and enhance public service delivery through responsible AI deployments. And third is keep Australians safe by strengthening existing legal frameworks, mitigate harms such as bias and synthetic misinformation, and reinforce safety governance institutions. The ambition behind the AI plan is very clear. By 2030, Australia should possess sustainable digital and compute capability. This combined with the governance maturity required to deploy AI confidently and competitively. And that raises the next critical question. Where does sovereignty become non-negotiable? So up to this point, we have discussed sovereignty at a strategic level. But frankly, sovereignty is not uniformly required across every use case. But in certain sectors, it becomes non-negotiable. So let's explore a few such sectors. For example, in defense environments, AI systems increasingly support intelligence analysis, logistics optimization, autonomous systems, and operational decision making. So here, assurance is paramount. So model opacity, foreign administrative control, or infrastructure dependency introduces unacceptable risk. These systems must operate within tightly controlled and auditable and secure environments. So as we can imagine, in this domain, sovereignty is not just about preference, it's about operational continuity and national security. Another sector is healthcare, which introduces different but equally critical dimension. AI is increasingly embedded in diagnostics, treatment optimizations, and population health analytics. The underlying data is deeply sensitive, which is personal, medical, and in many cases culturally significant. Sovereignty here requires strict governance of patient data, compliance with Australian privacy frameworks, and particular respect for indigenous data sovereignty principles. So, trust in AI within healthcare depends directly on governance credibility. Another important sector is financial services. Here, sovereignty intersects with regulatory accountability. APRA standards, including CPS 230, CPS 234, which is about information security, this place explicit responsibility on boards to manage third party and technology related risks. AI systems used in credit assessments, for example, in fraud detection, advice generation, or risk modeling, must therefore be governed with clear jurisdictional clarity, contractual safeguards, and auditability. This is no longer just a CIO issue, it is a board level risk obligation. And finally, critical infrastructures such as energy grids, water systems, transport networks, these increasingly integrate AI into their operational technology environments. In these settings, cybersecurity resilience is paramount. AI-driven optimization must not create new synthetic vulnerabilities. Governance must ensure visibility, control, and rapid containment capability in the event of compromise. So, across these sectors, the message is very clear. Sovereignty is not uniform. It is proportional to impact and risk. And this brings us to the next enterprise question. What does all this mean for Australian boards and executive leaders? So, if we bring this discussion from national level into the boardrooms, the message becomes very, very practical. AI can no longer be treated as an experimental tool deployed at the edge of organization. It must be treated as a governed enterprise capability. Boards and executive leaders need to focus on four emerging governance themes: how to manage AI vendor concentration risk, how to ensure jurisdictional clarity over data and model access, how to ensure contractual protections and audit rights, and how to bring transparency and ongoing model oversight. So, in other words, AI strategy is now inseparable from enterprise risk management. For organizations that prioritize sovereign or controlled AI environments, the benefits are clear and tangible. First is regulatory alignment. Models that are tuned to Australian legal context, regulatory language, and local nuance, they tend to produce outputs that are more aligned with domestic compliance expectations. Second, intellectual property protection. Running AI models in private, onshore, or contractually ring-fenced environments reduces the risk that proprietary data, strategy documents, or client information are used to improve public foundation models. Third, operational resilience. Sovereign environments help address the shadow AI phenomenon, where employees use unsanctioned public tools to accelerate work. When organizations provide safe, compliant AI pathways internally, they reduce unsupervised experimentation externally. Now, it is equally important to be pragmatic. Most Australian enterprises do not and they should not attempt to build foundational models from scratch. A practical approach is sovereign inferencing. This means running advanced global models within domestically controlled or contractually governed environments, ensuring prompts, fine tuning data, and outputs remain within defined jurisdictional and compliance boundaries. It balances innovation with control. And for most enterprises, that balance is the real objective. This leads to the final strategic reflection. If sovereignty is properly implemented, is it merely defensive or can it become a competitive advantage? Let's explore that. So, what does this mean in practical terms for executive leadership? For the Australian boardrooms, the mandate is very clear: drive growth through innovation, but secure it through sovereignty. This requires moving beyond AI vision statements and into disciplined implementation. Let me outline five practical priorities for the boards and senior executives. First, evaluate and uplift AI governance. Leaders should not wait for a standalone AI Act before acting. Australia's regulatory model is largely technology neutral. That means existing privacy, consumer protection, operational risk, and security laws already apply. The priority is to uplift current governance frameworks and align them with emerging standards such as ISO IEC 42001 for AI management systems. That includes clear executive accountability, formal AI use case registers, defined model approval pathways, and ongoing risk monitoring. It is also important that AI governance sits alongside cyber, operational risk, and data governance, and not outside them. Now, second, prioritize sovereign inferencing. For most enterprises, the smarter strategy is not building new foundational models. It is running world class models in an environment that is contractually and operationally controlled within Australian jurisdiction. Sovereign inferencing ensures that prompts, fine-tuning data, and outputs they remain within defined compliance boundaries without incurring the prohibitive cost of training large-scale models independently. So it is a innovation. It is innovation with guardrails. Third, address the trust and skill gap. AI success is not purely technical. It is organizational. Leaders must actively scaffold AI adoption by embedding structured training, clear usage policies, and cultural alignment. Employees need to see AI not as a job eliminator, but as a productivity partner. We are already seeing role evolution from doing tasks manually to checking, curating, and validating AI generated outputs. This capability shift is real and it must be managed deliberately. Fourth, manage vendor and supply chain concentration. Dependency risk is often invisible until it becomes critical. So CIOs must map concentration exposure across cloud, identity, model providers, and AI platforms. In particular, the contract should include audit rights, data deletion guarantees, clear jurisdictional safeguards, and exit and portability provisions. And finally, adopt the step back strategy. It is important to have discipline around AI investment. Not every problem requires agentic AI. Organizations struggling to move from pilot to production often benefit from stepping back and asking, is this the right approach? Traditional machine learning, analytics, or process automation may deliver far superior ROI for repetitive high volume use cases. Sovereign strategy is not about maximal adoption, it is about intentional deployment. And that brings us to the broader reflection. If implemented with discipline, sovereignty is not a brake on innovation, it becomes its foundation. So, as we conclude, let me leave you with one central idea. Sovereign AI is not a defensive reflex against geopolitical uncertainty. It is a strategic enabler of innovation, resilience, and long term digital independence. For Australia, sovereignty does not mean building everything alone. It means exercising deliberate control where it matters most in infrastructure, in governance, legal authority, and societal alignment. It means ensuring that the AI systems shaping healthcare outcomes, financial stability, national security, and public services operate transparently, accountably, and under Australian law. When AI is aligned with national values of fairness, human rights, transparency, and democratic oversight, it strengthens public trust, and trust accelerates adoption. The organizations and governments that act now, reframing sovereignty from a perceived constraint into a competitive advantage, will define the next phase of technology leadership. Thank you. If you found this discussion valuable, please follow and subscribe to Enterprise Tech Talk. And thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.